SDA? I think it's CamarilloSDA.org, right? Yeah, CamarilloSDA.org. And it's already on the archives? It's on the video archives. So you can access that, or, go invite some friends and watch it with them. So anyway, we're pleased to have Wes give us another presentation, and it's going to be more on the chronic diseases, and then we'll finish with some questions and answers. So thanks, Wes.
Series this weekend. It's been good to be with you this weekend, and as Dr. Lowell mentioned, our goal is to kind of just give a general overview of this, of what the underlying triggers are of these very devastating chronic diseases: diabetes, dementia, cardiovascular disease, cancer. We could fill in a whole bunch of blanks there in addition to those four major conditions. The theme of this weekend, of course, has been, what can we do right now to get prepared? What can we do right now to begin the journey of healing in our lives? And too many of us have waited too long already. Let me tell you a little bit about my journey. Just because I've done what I've done professionally for over 30 years now, and I've been interested in health ever since I was a young teenager, doesn't mean I always make the best decisions about my health. Yeah, I'm human just like you are, and I'm subject to temptations just like you are. And one of the things that I noticed over this past year is that I was starting to gradually gain weight. And I noticed that there was actually times in my life when I was very sedentary because we were traveling a lot, or we were getting ready to leave the country as medical missionaries, and so we were living out of, dorm rooms at Andrews University, where we were learning the tricks of the trade, so to speak, as missionaries, and eating cafeteria food 3 times a day, and just taking advantage of whatever's available, right? So at home, we usually make really good choices by only buying food that is really healthy to eat. And when you come home and you're hungry, the only option you have is eat some healthy food, because that's all you have available. But when you're eating at cafeterias a lot, or when you're eating out a lot, for many of us, the temptation is great, and we take advantage of that opportunity, and we end up eating things that really aren't the best for us, or eating a lot more than we would need of concentrated foods. And so I've noticed that I can gain 20 pounds very quickly. Very quickly. And many of you know what I'm talking about, right? It's not that hard for many of us to just gain weight in an unhealthful way. So as we were beginning this year, our church in Fallbrook decided to have a 10 days of prayer program. And I've told some of you this already, but and so the idea was for 10 days of prayer, we're going to be every evening we're going to have time to really get together as a group and pray for God's blessing on whatever we feel impressed that we need in our lives, physically, emotionally, socially, or spiritually. And so we decided, my wife Betsy and I decided, that we were going to forego any TV in the evening. No, I'm a news junkie. I like to know what's going on in the world. And so I tend to watch a lot of news. And so no TV, no entertainment of that nature. And we were going to also change our diet. We always would eat a good breakfast and lunch, but when you get home after a hard days of work, it's easy to eat more of the good food than you necessarily need. And that was indeed one of our challenges. We were eating more than we needed to, especially in the evening. So we decided for 10 days we're going to just skip entertainment, TV, and the evening meal. Now, the first day or two was a little bit uncomfortable because, And of course, I always tell my patients, when you're feeling hungry at night, and there's a reason to limit your food intake, what you can do is and you start getting hungry, let's say you decide you're not going to have dinner, or you're going to have a very light early dinner, and you get hungry a couple hours later, what do? Well, what do most of us do? We just kind of give in. We go with how we feel, because that's what humans do. If we have access, we take advantage. And so what I suggest to my patients is, it's just like an hour or two before bedtime. Okay? Drink a little water, do a little bit of light exercise, take a couple of deep breaths, and go do something else. But don't find yourself migrating over to that refrigerator door and opening it, staring at, wondering if something jumps out at you, right? Okay, so you just tell yourself, I use the term joyfully wait until breakfast. Say, within a couple hours, I'm going to be asleep, and then when I wake up, I can have a good breakfast. So look forward to the celebration, the break fast, right? Where you break the fast and you enjoy a good meal. So most of us really don't need that evening meal. Now, I'm not saying everybody should just have 2 meals a day. That's really a very individual decision. There's patients that I tell them, do not eat 2 meals a day. You need a third meal. Certain people really need that third meal. But many of us could benefit, at least for a time, to forego that last meal. Now, what that does is that's one of the most powerful ways to begin to reverse the insulin resistance, which is the underlying driver of metabolic syndrome, which is the main drivers, at least one of the top drivers of many illnesses, including certainly diabetes, high blood pressure, many forms of heart disease, and cancer, as well as dementia. In fact, you could argue that it's actually the most common or biggest medical driver of all those diseases, insulin resistance. Just simply foregoing a meal that we don't really need, most of us, can move greatly forward, help us move forward into reversing that underlying insulin resistance, where now the metabolism starts working the way it should, things balance out, and then we can start seeing benefits across the board. So I was in a situation where I was really at least 10, 15 pounds overweight come just last month. And so that was an opportunity I had to say, okay, we're doing this special event at our church. We're going to associate it with not eating that evening meal, not doing entertainment, and then focusing our extra 2 to 3 hours every evening on actually reading to each other. So we actually purchased books on answers to prayer, spiritual enlightenment. I don't actually read, other than my professional work, I don't really read that much, and that's sad, because reading is what makes you smarter. And so we had a wonderful time in January reading to each other. Well, I did most of the reading and made sure that I kept my wife awake, because my voice, I'm told, puts people to sleep. I'm paying attention. I'm paying attention. Okay, so at any rate, so we, at first we weren't sure how much of a progress we were making, but you don't follow your feelings or even what appears to be happening or not happening clinically. You focus on the process. Have faith in the process itself. So logic and science suggest if you're foregoing a meal in the evening, which is usually more food than any other meal you have, eventually that's going to have an impact on your health in some very positive ways, right? And so one of our goals that was, there's clinical goals where you do extensive lab work and you see where your problem areas are, and then you zero in on those areas. And then there's other things that are pretty much self-evident in our lives. You know, I could, every time I got ready for work, you know, and or was dressing, I could feel and see and pinch that extra amount of fat in my midsection, and I knew that wasn't healthy, and I knew that it was something obvious in my life that I should deal with. You know, I don't have to get some major medical checkup to explain to me why I needed to lose that extra weight. So, and I was so pleased that at the end of the month of January that I had actually lost 15 pounds. You know, everybody loses at different rates, okay? And it's really not the weight loss itself that made me healthier. I believe it's just a process that I went through to get rid of unnecessary calories in my diet and help the body kind of restructure itself in a healthy way. So my first encouragement to all of us is to take advantage of what I did. You know, it's just to optimize your health by making some decisions that by sticking to that for a period of, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks, you can make a major improvement in your health. And then, if you like what you've experienced and you notice that there's still some additional benefits that you want to accomplish, then you can continue simple strategies like that. Now, let me share with you one of the, what you're seeing here on the screen is a iceberg, right? This gargantuan iceberg floating in the ocean, where we know that 90% typically of an iceberg is not visible above the ocean surface. It's actually there beneath the ocean surface. And so most of illness and most of disease in our lives is not readily visible. There is indications of it that are visible, but most of the actual metabolic disease is harder to see. You have to actually dip down under the ocean, and then you go, wow, that is much bigger than I would have thought. Okay, and so this is a representation, if you will, of insulin resistance, of what we call metabolic syndrome. Now, a simple ways to evaluate metabolic syndrome, or insulin resistance syndrome, as it used to be called, is there's actually various risk factors that are readily available from any doctor's visit. Number one, it's not weight, it's waist to hip ratio, or the waist circumference. So if you notice that your waist is getting larger, in fact, your waist is any larger than your hips, you got an issue there. Okay, and so that's hit number one. So if you have 3 hits out of 5 risk factors, that automatically qualifies us for metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance syndrome. The others include a elevated triglyceride above 150, which is very common. Ideal triglycerides are under 100, but if you're under 150, we'll give you a passing grade. Okay, and by the way, one of the reasons why I wanted to lose the weight, more importantly, because historically, I've always run high triglycerides. Some of us are just naturally running high triglycerides. When I was a young athlete, in my late 20s and early 30s, I thought I was super fit. I thought I was Mr. Fitness, and I had my cholesterol and triglycerides checked when I was 24. And my triglycerides were almost 500. Okay? So that's what woke me up out of denial. You know, so they say the Nile is not just a river in Egypt, right? Denial is something right between your ears. And most of us are at some level of denial because we've never taken the time to properly evaluate our health. And so that's why in my practice, I encourage very comprehensive testing. Now, I know some docs that I respect a lot, they dismiss comprehensive testing because their opinion is, well, we're just going to do this anyways. You know, we're going to get everybody into a plant-based diet anyways. We're going to be exercising. We're going to be doing all these things. But you know what? The human factor is such that unless you can prove to me, I'm not going to change my diet for anybody. I don't care if Dr. Lowell has all the answers in the world. If he tells me to change my diet, I'm going to like, yeah, right? But if he tests my blood and shows me a readout that came from inside my body, and he says, Wes, look at your triglycerides, man. Okay, you got to get going. You got to make a change here. I'm concerned about you. If he basically reads me the right act, right, which is our job as doctors, to be basically frank with you and tell you like it is. Otherwise, we're not doing our job. You know, the patients don't always do 100% of what we say. Is that true? Is that possible? Right? Okay. But if we water it down to only 20% of the reality of the problem, and then you only do half of that, you've just done 10%. You're going to get nowhere doing 10%. So you need to know the actual reality of the problem, and broad-based lab work, broad-based testing is by far the most important first step in having a call to action. Because otherwise, it's just all theoretical. You know, this is all statistical. And the human factor is, well, I'm not, you know, I didn't really buy into that. I'll mess with it. I'll experience this new diet for a while. But after a while, you know, I'm just going to go back to the way I like to eat before, because we don't have a real call to action. So that's why I encourage you, if you do programs with Dr. Lowe, you do the Diabetes Undone program, do the testing. Get the comprehensive testing. That's what guides you in ways that nothing else can motivate you. You have the excess weight around the midsection. Okay, so the waist measurement is starting to get bigger. That's hit number one. Hit number two is a high triglyceride above 150. An HDL, the healthy cholesterol, less than 40 for men or 50 for women. So that's hit number three. Okay, and then your blood pressure is not even technically hypertensive. It's 130, 35 over 80, 85. I think that's correct. So just slightly elevated blood pressures is another hit number 4. Okay, and then, okay, which one am I missing here, Dr. Lowe? There's got to be one more. Oh, the most important one of all, the reason I'm here, okay, is there's a really good doctor out there that helps people with dementia. I'm going to have to go see him, okay? It's a fasting blood glucose of 100 or higher. Now, in my opinion, that number should be under 90. In fact, ideally under 85, 70 to 84. The fasting blood glucose. Anything higher than 84 is already in the early phases of insulin resistance. And if you get above 90, it's almost guaranteed that you have an underlying insulin resistance, even though you may not have prediabetes yet. And then once you hit 100 or higher, there's just no question you're significantly resistant to insulin, which is represented by this huge area of metabolic dysfunction, of metabolic triggers towards illness that are fomenting in your body, as represented by the 90% of that iceberg that lie under the surface of the ocean. So this is a very, very critical step to pay attention to. So if you have 3 out of any of those 5 risk factors, you have metabolic syndrome. Now, I personally like to measure insulin levels with a fasting blood sugar, and ideally with a glucose tolerance test at 1 and 2 hours after a sugar drink. It's a functional endocrine stress test to see what happens when you have sugar, the equivalent of a medium soda, okay, or even a lot of refined whole carbohydrates like mashed potatoes or white rice, a couple cups of that. It actually does the same to the body, pretty much the same to the body in terms of blood sugar levels. So we check blood sugar levels before and after meals, and we check insulin levels fasting 1 and 2 hours. That's an ideal test. I've been recommending that test to every patient I've seen for the last 30 years. Okay, so it's a very, very useful test. So the reason this is important is that even if your blood sugars aren't high at any point in time during that test, but your insulin production goes high as an attempt to prevent your blood sugars from going high, that dramatically increases risk. So let's talk about what that means to different health conditions. I probably spend more of my clinical time every week with patients helping individuals who are struggling with cognitive decline. Essentially helping people address the what we call type 3 diabetes, or insulin resistance of the brain. So type 3 diabetes is diabetes of the brain, or insulin resistance of the brain. Alzheimer's is basically what we normally think of it. So Alzheimer's and most forms of dementia is really driven in large part, not exclusively, but the most common underlying trigger is this insulin resistance that we just defined in common terms that everybody can figure out whether you're prone to that or not. Okay, so if we have any of those 5 risk factors, then it seems logical that we should do whatever is reasonable to start working on decreasing those risk factors, whether it's central weight gain, whether it's blood pressure, whether it's the triglycerides and the good HDL cholesterol, or the blood sugars. Fortunately, the very best strategies for improving all of them lie within the principles that we use to reverse diabetes and prediabetes, and are highlighted in the Diabetes Undone program that this church organization has been. How many have you done now, Dr. Lowe? For 5 or so programs over the past years. So, and it's a once-a-week commitment for 8 weeks where you're learning how to reverse insulin resistance. And this is whether you have had diabetes or prediabetes or not, because the vast majority of us are insulin resistant. Now, as I mentioned last night, if you're between the ages of 40 and 59, chances are that 1 out of 2 of you, 50%, have at least prediabetes already. In other words, you're way beyond just insulin resistant. You're insulin resistant, and even all that extra insulin you're producing is not even able to control your blood sugar. So now you have the worst of both worlds. You have high insulin production that's not working, and you still have high blood sugars in spite of that. Okay? So if you're between the ages of 60 and 74, you're basically 2 out of 3 of us, that age group, have at minimum pre-diabetes. And if you're 75 or older, 3 out of 4 of you have at least pre-diabetes. So the problem is that my estimates is that close to 80 to 90% of people who actually have prediabetes still don't know it. And it's one of the biggest causes of premature heart disease, high blood pressure, dementia, and cancer risk. So really, we want to know, right? We want to figure this out. Now, so that's pre-diabetes, but what do we deal with this risk that many of us carry for insulin resistance itself? That without the evidence from blood pressures, from weight, from triglycerides, HDL, and so forth. We may not have any of those risk factors and still have insulin resistance. Why? Because the body is producing more insulin to try to correct for these issues. Here's one of the downsides of that. I recently was talking to Michael Greger about a year ago at the Plantrition Project in San Diego. We were both speaking together, and he said, "Hey Wes, when are you going to write your next book?" And of course he struck it big, with his How Not to Die book, right? And I go like, "Oh, I don't want to write another book." And I said, you know how hard it is to write a book? If you ever tried to write a book, it's insanely hard. And you need a lot of help with it, and you got to have a whole team working with you. My Goodbye Diabetes book that I wrote 5 or 6 years ago now, it really took 3 to 4 years for us to write that. And I had help. Okay. The Hello Healthy book was easier because we transcribed 12 lectures that I give, the 12 Weeks to Wellness lectures, transcribed them, and then gave them to a professional writer to put into book form, and then I went in and spent 500 hours adding new information. Anytime a writer does your writing, half the time it's incorrect. It's not scientifically accurate, and so I had to go back and edit everything. But then it came out really good. Hello Healthy, the book, what I want every one of my patients to understand. Okay, so I didn't want to write a new book, and I told that to Michael Greger. Well, I didn't know how persistent my father would be this past year. And so he was so eager for me to write a book on the main work I do now, helping people with dementia or people at risk of dementia, that we actually wrote the book Memory Makeover, How to Prevent Alzheimer's and Reverse Cognitive Decline, reverse aspects of cognitive decline. I'm proud to say that in almost every case we can slow down and begin, up to 80% of the time we can actually reverse various aspects of cognitive decline, even with people with advanced forms of dementia and Alzheimer's. So there's always hope, but here's the reason I'm telling you this. There is a perfect storm that develops metabolically in our body that drives dementia, the big driver, and that is blood sugar related. So that's why doctors from Brown University, neuropathologists from that medical center, as early as 1995, were saying that the brains of Alzheimer's patients during autopsy indicated severe insulin resistance. So when I first read that, I went, this is very important for us, okay, that especially because we know that insulin resistance is such a big driver of diabetes, regular diabetes, and heart disease and cancer. So the way high insulin resistance causes damage to the brain is that, number one, if you have to produce more insulin to control blood sugars right after the meal, what typically happens to most of us is the blood sugar still goes up too high, but then the extra insulin produced forces the blood sugar down too low, and that drop of blood sugar creates what we call a reactive hypoglycemia. It doesn't happen in everybody, but it happens in a lot more people than I would have predicted before. I've literally done 4-hour glucose tolerance tests on thousands of patients since 1990. Actually, in 1990, I was doing 2 hours. I think it was 1992, 93 that I switched to a 4-hour test, which gave me so much more information about the lows, not just the highs. And so a high blood sugar is bad for the brain. It literally causes a crystallization of glucose, of sugar, to the neurons and to the cells in the brain that literally damage the brain. It literally causes trauma to the brain. If you have a concussion or you get hit really hard, you have a traumatic brain injury, a TBI, okay, that's trauma because of a rebound concussion in the brain. But chemical damage, where sugar is irreversibly glazing or caramelizing itself to the brain tissue is just as traumatic as a concussion, depending on how much of it you have. And so that's the first trauma to the brain, the high blood sugars. Then, when the blood sugars go too low, that further traumatizes the brain because the brain can't operate without a steady, even blood sugar. It doesn't want a high blood sugar, but it certainly doesn't want a low blood sugar either. In fact, we could argue that, at least acutely speaking, a low blood sugar is far worse than a high blood sugar ever was. Because a low blood sugar basically is strangling the brain from its main energy supply. You're basically, it's like you're cutting off oxygen to the brain. It's basically very similar to that. And the neurons in the brain, especially in the hippocampus, the short-term memory center of the brain, they literally start dying like flies. They just die. And you know, we don't want our brain cells to die, right? We want to hold on to them for the rest of our lives, okay? But do you know what? That the average person, or many individuals, actually, they have about 1,000 brain cells that die every day. 1,000. That's horrible. Okay, and one of the big drivers for that is the trauma that occurs when your blood sugars drop. The good news is that by applying the broad-based lifestyle medicine principles that are highlighted in the Diabetes Undone program that this church is going to be offering, you can actually turn that around so that not only are you preventing 1,000 brain cells, and we're talking about in the hippocampus, the short-term memory center of the brain, instead of having 1,000 cells die there every day, we can stop that progressive form of dementia, and we can start regrowing around 700 new brain cells a day. Now, is that cause for celebration? You know, that doesn't mean go to Dairy Queen celebration. Okay, it's just cause for celebration, right? Where we are now recognizing that we have the potential to regrow the very area of the brain, the hippocampus, that is responsible for short-term memory and transferring that to long-term memory. That's good news. But to do that, we have to have, once again, the theme, a multi-prong approach, a multifactorial approach, not just one thing. We can't be just champions of one thing. It has to be the comprehensive lifestyle strategies that, once again, are championed in the program Diabetes Undone. The third part of the perfect storm associated with blood sugars and how they affect dementia is the high insulin level. So you got high blood sugar levels, which then stimulates the pancreas, if it's capable, of producing extra insulin to try to prevent the sugar from going that high. But because there's so much resistance to insulin, right, in the muscle and in the liver itself, the pancreas has to make more and more and more insulin just to even prevent higher blood sugars. They're not even controlling the blood sugars, they're just preventing even higher blood sugars. Well, that extra insulin all by itself significantly impairs brain function. So the very hormone that is necessary to keep us alive, to get sugar from the blood into the brain, to get sugar from the blood into the muscles, to keep every cell of our body alive and healthy, the very hormones that's indispensable for health is also a hormone, if produced in excess, actually causes serious chronic disease. And what happens is that if insulin stays high too long, that's going to stimulate horrible changes in blood sugar, causing an even bigger drop in the blood sugar, right? Because that's what insulin does. So immediately when the insulin goes high, there are enzymes in our body and brain called insulin-degrading enzymes, IDEs, where their job is to break down insulin and get rid of the extra insulin so you don't end up in coma because your blood sugars are so low, or death, right? So the body has these fail-safe strategies to prevent coma. That's a good thing, right? And death. So what's the problem with that? The problem is that the insulin-degrading enzymes really should have a different name. Their primary job isn't to get rid of excess insulin. Their primary job is to get rid of beta amyloid plaque. Okay? And when insulin levels go high for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours after a meal, now the very detoxification enzyme that's getting rid of the beta amyloid plaques in the brain that cause brain damage, okay, and dementia are not being addressed. You see the importance of this? So that's why I feel it's so important that we actually need to measure insulin and blood sugars throughout a timed test. Okay, so that's maybe a better understanding of the underlying issues of insulin resistance for dementia. Briefly, let me comment on cancer. There's many drivers of cancer. We don't even pretend to understand what all the drivers are. But one of the drivers that we should be aware of that doesn't apply to everybody but to most of us is that high insulin production, higher than it would be optimal for us as individuals, is a promoter of cancer. And there's many studies documenting this. In fact, there's been studies demonstrating this ever since the mid-1940s. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies documenting that. And so sometimes, we as busy doctors, when something is diagnosed, we just say, well, it is what it is. And there's no understanding of what made it happen or what drove it or what the underlying triggers might have been. Now let's just start treating it. But when it makes sense to carefully evaluate all the potential underlying causes of that condition. And so we know that excess insulin is a major initiator and promoter of cancer. A lot of research on this, especially breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer for men, and ovarian cancer for women, and skin cancer for both men and women, but especially women. So skin cancer, insulin resistance, and insulin, interesting. So the risk can go up as high as 30 to 50% compared to people who don't have it, have the insulin resistance that's significant. Okay, so we have cancer, we have dementia, heart disease. Dr. David Eddy, a mathematician, PhD in mathematics, and a medical doctor, professor at Duke University, did a study that using an algorithm, a mathematical algorithm called the Archimedes study. Sounds pretty smart, right? It's the Archimedes. You got to be really smart to even understand what he did, because I don't. And Archimedes, basically, this was a computerized algorithm that took individuals from an NIH database, 10,000 individuals, and then artificially lowered just one risk factor based on computer modeling and what we know from studies to date. And by lowering blood pressure for the next 40 years, predicted the decreased risk of heart disease. And they did that for every risk factor. You know what the number one cause of premature heart attacks was? The one risk factor that was more responsible than smoking, than high blood pressure, than high cholesterol, than anything else. It was insulin resistance. When the body has to produce more insulin to compensate for a rising blood sugar. And so in other words, the number one driver based on this huge mathematical model was insulin resistance in causing heart attacks and strokes. Okay, so I think we have enough insight from the research on why it's important to reverse insulin resistance. Once again, fortunately, we have available to us comprehensive strategies, programs like the Diabetes Undone program and like the CHIP program that are effective in helping people go through a series of steps that help them accomplish those results. Okay, now, if there was ever a time, as I've been suggesting last night and during the presentation this morning, if there was ever a time for us to be taking care of our health or to initiate strategies to improve our health, it's now. As I've done my extensive research on this COVID-19 illness caused by the SARS coronavirus 2 virus, we recognize that more and more studies are coming out. The people at risk are those who have excess weight, who have diabetes, who have insulin resistance, who have COPD, who have asthma, who have any underlying medical condition. So those of us that we know if there's something that we need to do for our health, this is the time to act. This is not the time to say, hey, you know, I'm busy right now, right? Because we're all busy, right? You know, it's the tyranny of the urgent, right? I'm busy right now, but maybe at spring break, I'm going to go get a checkup, and then I'll initiate a program. So before I take questions, let me tell you a quick story. And the story just came to me. It's a story that I lived through myself. I had a patient, this is over 10 years ago, and single mother, 14-year-old son, hard worker, and she had been working very hard as a single mother to take care of her son, and she was really, really motivated to address her health concerns. She knew she had health issues. She had been told by her doctors that she needed to do something, and she was 100% behind doing this naturally and doing this with lifestyle medicine. But she told me at my very first visit with her, she says, you know what? You just need to be patient with me. I want you to do a comprehensive order on me, a lab order, and then I'm going to go over it with you. So she did that. She came back to see me. We went over to her, found all kinds of health issues. And then she said, okay, doc, I just want you to know, be patient with me. Says, I have decided. She was really organized. I had it all planned out. She says, I'm in a transition right now with work. Says, in 3 months, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to hit this 100%. But I don't want to start until I can do it 100%. So I want you to give me the plan, then I'm going to start it in 3 months. So, you know, I've always had the opinion, you know, I'm willing to work with people wherever they're at. And so obviously she was organized, bet more than 90% of my patients. She had a passion for doing what was right, and she had a plan of when she was going to start. Says, okay. So about 6 weeks later, I'm talking to the manager of the medical group who I worked for at the time, and I said, hey, when's Mary going to be following up with me? As she called then to schedule. And the manager of the medical group turned around and looked at me, and she said, Dr. Y, you didn't hear? I go, like what? He said, Mary was at a football game in San Diego with the Chargers game. She was a big Chargers fan. She'd actually wear Chargers jerseys. With her son and some friends. She had a massive heart attack and died right there in the stadium. And I wish I could take that back. You know, I wish I would have said something different to her to impress upon her the importance of not waiting 3 months, that you can start something now. But that option for her is gone. Okay, And the reason I didn't even, I was just impressed to tell you that story just now. I haven't even thought of that story for years. But, you know, we're potentially coming into a time where we're not going to have that option. And so if you're gonna do something for your health, do it now while you can, while you have time to plan it out and figure it out and start implementing right away. Do something simple like my wife Betsy and I did. Just have a good breakfast and lunch and then skip the evening meal if that's what you deem is important for you. That's not for everybody, okay? But it would be, if you're insulin resistant, if you have hypertension or high cholesterol or some other medical problem or you're overweight, then that would be an obvious thing to do. Okay, let me give you a tip for breakfast, and then we'll take some questions. I mentioned last night the 3-cube diet. Okay, I was so fortunate that Mrs. Lowell this morning made for us a 3-cube diet breakfast, and I wasn't expecting it, but she actually sautéed some mushrooms and some spinach and had all kinds of other good fruit and stuff, and I had at least 4 or 5 servings of stir-fried vegetables and healthy fruits for breakfast. So we want to have a total of 9 servings a day. I mean, talking about cup servings of those colorful vegetables primarily and some fruits. Okay, because it's the whole plant-based foods. It's those foods that have the plant-based chemicals in them that are medicinal and that heal the body. The typical stuff that we get at the store, the processed stuff, is not only not going to heal the body, but it's going to actually create more stress on the body. So be aware, pay attention to those concerns. So, 10 years ago, I would have thought it was crazy if I was eating veggies for breakfast. You know, I mean, when I was in Thailand as a student intern in the late '80s in Singapore, yeah, a lot of people eat vegetables for breakfast. You know, kind of in a soup format. I ate it. I thought that was actually okay. But just most Americans don't think of that. You know, that's just awkward to eat vegetables for breakfast. But now I would rather eat vegetables for breakfast, stir-fried vegetables, than anything else. Okay, so make sure that every meal counts. Like Dr. Joel Furman says, you got to get your points. If you're not eating, green leafy vegetables and colorful vegetables, you ain't going to get points enough to make that day count to make you healthier. It's not just eating less food. In fact, I would say the opposite. Eat more food, just make sure it's the right food. Okay, and when you eat a lot of the right food, it displaces the unhealthy food, or the food that may not necessarily be unhealthy, but neither is it healthy. In other words, it's getting in the way of health because it's not healthy. So consider some of those options as you initiate your program. And then let me I already talked about sleep last night, so I'll leave that for the video. You watch the recording. But let me say something about exercise. Let me just quickly actually end with this study. I love this quote from Norman Cousins. He said, "Don't deny the diagnosis, defy the verdict." So don't worry about getting diagnosed with diabetes or heart disease or whatever. That's not the problem. The problem is being in denial that you don't have it or that you can't really do anything about it. That's the problem. Once you get diagnosed with that, embrace it and reverse it, because you can. Don't let anybody tell you can't. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to live with this the rest of your life. You will only have to live with it for the rest of your life if you don't address the actual cause of the problem, which means you'll never be healthy until you do. That's the bottom line. So let me end today with the story of Michael. This was actually a patient that I had when we were on the island of Guam for 14 years. He was an American who'd married a Japanese lady, and she was really worried for him because they were just in their car driving on Marine Corps Drive in Guam one day, and got into a bad accident, ended up in the ER. And the ER physician came up to Michael and said, how long you had diabetes? And he looked at the doctor and says, I don't have diabetes. And the doctor says, yeah, you do. How long have you had diabetes? He says, I'm telling you, I don't have diabetes. And the doctor says, well, I'm telling you, you not only have diabetes, but you're out of control diabetic. And he was shocked. He was shocked. His blood sugars were sky high. And so when he was referred by his family physician to our diabetes reversal clinic at our wellness center at the Guam 7th Adventist Clinic, which is a large clinic with 300 employees, and so he came to see, he was overweight, weighing 230 pounds. He was basically smaller than I am, and so he was a good 40 pounds, 50 pounds overweight. Blood pressure is 150 or 100 with multiple blood pressure medications. His cholesterol is 230. His triglycerides high. His fasting blood sugar almost 300 at 278. Hemoglobin A1C 10.8. Now, so that's what he came to us with. And I remember Michael, because we were in our classroom that had a big boardroom table in the middle. So everybody sat around the boardroom table. There was about 20 of us sitting around the boardroom table. And I'm lecturing on diabetes. And it just so happens that afternoon in our diabetes clinic, I was talking about the power of after-meal exercise. That after every meal, that we should do some exercise. I'm not talking about get sweaty exercise. I'm talking about just go for a walk. Just go do something. Just spend 10, 20, even 30 minutes just going for a walk and enjoying the outdoors. You know, we've lost the art of enjoying life. Just go for a walk. Look at the birds. You know, breathe the fresh air. Smell the roses, right? Enjoy yourselves. Go for a walk. So first thing you do, right after the meal, you go for a walk. And I was explaining this just as Michael and his wife came in the door. And of course, everybody kind of turned to see who the new guests were. And here was Michael on a walk with a walker. You know, he'd been in an accident, been just diagnosed with out-of-control diabetes, and he's coming in, and his wife is right behind him, making sure he doesn't fall. And he's literally going about this fast. Literally. And so I'm looking, so it took him about 5 minutes to come around the room and to find the seats where there's 2 open chairs. And so we're all a little bit distracted because we're curious, what happened to you kind of thing. And so I'm explaining that for every minute that you exercise immediately after the meal, I'm just talking about going for a walk. Just, you're in your suit, you're not going to get sweaty, just go for a walk. And you can lower your blood sugars anywhere from 1 point to 3 points, such that if you exercise for 10 minutes right after the meal, you could, and you're just mildly pre-diabetic, you could lower your blood sugars by 10 points just because of that. Or you might lower it 20 points, or if you're diabetic, you might lower it 30 points just with 10 minutes. But if you do that for 30 minutes, light walking right after the meal, you can, instead of having a blood sugar of 300, you could end up at 1 or 2 hours after the meal with a blood sugar of 210 instead of 300. That's huge. That's more effective than insulin any day. You're just improving the way the liver and the muscles work and reversing insulin resistance. And so I was explaining this as Michael was taking multiple minutes to get to his chair, and I remember thinking to myself, well, there's somebody who's not going to do what I'm saying. They can barely get around the corner of the table. So he's not going to do it, because, I'd heard every excuse in the book. People say, oh, doctor, I can't exercise because, my knee. I go, really? Yeah, oh, yeah, my knee. And they indeed had knee problems. And so I would, I've learned the tricks, right? So I said, well, but your shoulder okay? Oh, yeah, my shoulder's fine. How about the other shoulder? How is that? Oh, yeah, the other shoulder's fine. Excellent. We just figured out what you can do and exercise every day. You can do this for 10, 20 minutes after every meal. They give me the look like, you tricked me. See, some people just don't, they like to complain about their health. They like to tell everybody about all their problems. that's the human factor. And I think most of us are kind of that way to some level. We like to kind of talk about it, but we don't really want to do anything about it. Okay, so, but if we understand that it's really reversible, if indeed we can get to a new place where we have gotten rid of that monkey on our back, okay, then we should be more willing to actually put the effort together. So, to make a long story short, Michael sits there, didn't say a word the whole time. We did the comprehensive blood testing on him. 3.5 weeks later, I kid you, it was just 3.5 weeks later after he'd walked into that room, I check his vitals and his statistics, his labs. He had already lost 9 pounds, 3.5 weeks. He's still overweight, but obviously he's doing something. His blood pressure is now 120/80, much better with less medicine. His cholesterol had dropped to 157 from 230 with no medication. His triglycerides now a perfect 102. His fasting blood glucose 90. And his hemoglobin A1C, that's supposed to take 4 months to normalize based on the fact that you're measuring a red blood cell, hemoglobin, that takes 4 months to be turned over. In just 3.5 weeks, his hemoglobin A1C had dropped from 10.8 to 8.2. Just short of miraculous transformation. So I said to Michael, he's sitting in my office, his wife is sitting right next to him. I said, Michael, what in the world did you do? And he looked at me like he was disappointed in me. Like he had this incredulous look on his face. He says, what do you mean, what did I do? For 5 minutes while I'm walking into your group clinic, the first time 3.5 weeks ago, all I heard was how important it was to exercise immediately after every meal. And I remember what I had thought. Oh, this guy's not going to do it. If there's anybody who has a good excuse, Michael's not going to do this. And so I said, well, what did you do? And he looked again at me like he was really disappointed in me. And he said, I did exactly what you told us to do. I go, what was that? Okay. And he said, I just went and exercised for 30 minutes after every meal. And I didn't say he had to do 30 minutes, especially in his position, in his situation. So I said, well, so how did you exercise? And he said, I'll show you. He stood up, he grabbed the walker, and he did this. That's what he did. It made me ashamed of the times I don't exercise. It really did. I mean, here's a guy who, he got diagnosed, and he said, by the grace of God, I'm going to reverse this. I'm going to do everything possible. I'm not going to play games with myself on this. And so I'm here to tell you today, you can be a Michael too. You can figure this out. Whatever it is, it might not be diabetes, but there are principles in place that you can learn. And again, talk to Dr. Lowell getting high on that list. The sicker, the better. So if you think you're too far gone, you're the perfect person for this program, okay? Because you're exactly the one that needs it the most. All right, so let's just pause for my short talk went never as short, right? Never as short. Okay, so that was only 3 slides too. Okay, so let's take. We have 2 mics. Don't raise your hand. Look at me if you have questions. If you don't have any questions, we can all go home now. Okay, but I suspect you're going to have questions. So look at the individuals with the mic, and they'll go to you, and then we'll take turns. Right here in the front row.
On the hot and cold treatments that you were talking about last evening, I believe you said like 3 minutes of the hot, and then would it be 3 minutes of cold, and how many cycles?
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you asked that question, because I realized last night I didn't really explain that adequately. There's so much to talk about. We could literally spend a whole hour talking about hydrotherapy, but let me give it to you real quick. What I call the poor man's hydrotherapy, which is what I do, okay, where you don't have somebody that's going to take 15 to 20 minutes to do it for you, like a nurse would, okay, or a physical therapist would. You just get into the shower, and you turn the water sort of hot, get used to that, then you keep turning it hot, 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 until you're taking deep breaths, and just the deep breaths alone is really good for, expanding the lungs. And when you expand the lungs, you put into commission the lower third of your lungs, the lower lobes that are typically stagnant. They're not doing anything. They're not exchanging gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. And so the white blood cells that are in the lungs are just, we call it marginated. They're literally just hanging out in the lungs going, whoo, we're just on R&R, we're just having a good time, we're not doing any work, we're not killing any viruses, we're not killing any cancer, we're just partying, okay? But if you start breathing deeply or doing the hot-cold therapies, those white blood cells get demarginated. The blood flow through those lungs will just take them right away from, they're no longer able to hang on to the artery wall. Okay, they get flooded into the bloodstream, and now you got killer cells killing virus right and left. So if you got soldiers in your body, they better be killing something that's bad for you, or else they're no good. Okay, so the first step is get it as hot as you can take it safely, right on your throat, lower throat and chest, for roughly 3 minutes. Okay, and keep your hand very close to the valve, so that if it starts getting like starts being a little too hot. And by the way, if you're diabetic, usually you can feel what's going on in your chest. You're not doing hydrotherapy on your feet right now, which might be numb, but most even diabetics can feel what's going on in their chest. So be, just the first couple times you do it, go a little milder, not as hot. So 3 minutes hot, and then you go 30 seconds cold, all the way. Don't wimp out on this. And now, if you do 33 minutes real hot, you're actually relieved to get some cold water on your body. Like, whew, get that heat out of the body, right? And so I do 30 seconds. I just keep moving back and forth in the shower so that the whole chest area is getting cold. And what happens, the hot brings white blood cells to the lungs. The cold flushes them back to the immune centers of the other immune centers of the body, so they can start producing antibodies. Then the hot brings them back to the lungs, and so you got this exchange of information, this chemotactic exchange of information that stimulates spontaneous blastogenesis, activation of the B cells to make more antibodies. And then what I do in the shower is I actually put my head under the cold water, because I just want to keep my brain cool. Because once you go hot the second time, you can go hotter, and then you're kind of panting. It's like my dog sitting by the fireplace. They're sitting there dying of heat, and they don't want to leave the fireplace because it feels so good, right? So you start panting a little bit, hot 3 minutes, and then go back to cold for 30 seconds, then cool off your whole body real quick, including your head, and then do it a third time, ending with cold. Now, after I end with cold, then I turn for 30 seconds, then I turn it back to warm and soap down with Castile soap, whole body, soap down with Castile. Why? Because Castile soap will remove all the toxins that you have sweated out during that hot-cold therapy. Otherwise, what happens to the toxins? They get sucked right back into your bloodstream. Don't want that. You want to get rid of them. So Castile soap in particular, it helps emulsify that off your body. So that's one session of hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. Takes about 12 minutes to get through that. And frankly, because I am of the opinion that we are well into our exposure phase of the SARS coronavirus 2, at the present time, I've been doing that every morning as part of my shower. That's how I do it. And then if I have any symptom whatsoever where I'm feeling like those, you know what it is, those early cold or flu-like symptoms, whatever it might be, then that means that your body is struggling with something, obviously, or else you wouldn't feel that way, even if it's just a little chill. And I try to do another session of that when I get home from work, to stimulate the immune system that way. So you could do that hot-cold shower therapy 3-4 times a day if necessary. Now, if you have a sauna, like an infrared sauna, that's uniquely suited for this because infrared goes deeper. And so it stimulates heat in the deeper tissues to get really into the lungs and so forth to stimulate blood flow to those tissues. And you do infrared sauna or other forms of sauna for 10 to 15 minutes. Usually I can't handle it more than 15 minutes before I need to take a cold shower. And that's not just because it's good for you, it's because I need a cold shower to feel better, right? From dripping heat for 15 minutes. So do 10 to 15 minutes of sauna followed by a cold shower. Soap down with Castile soap after every session, and then go back and do it once or twice more. So those are the simple hydrotherapy strategies available. Now, there's another one that, and this is why Battle Creek Sanitarium, which was set up in the late 1800s as the most prestigious health resort and sanitarium in the world. It was set up on Seventh-day Adventist health message principles that were using hydrotherapy and other techniques to help people get better. Henry Ford went there, presidents went there, and then, unfortunately, the main doctor at Dr. Kellogg, John Harvey Kellogg, started getting off into strange doctrines, and the hospital burnt down. So at any rate, the bottom line is this: the health message principles are the principles, including hydrotherapy, that can be used in times of distress where really there's no other option. Well, they can be used anytime, but if you can't go to the hospital because there's no place at the hospital for anybody, okay, then you have to do stuff on your own. That's your only option. Okay, and so those of us who take the time to learn these principles of hydrotherapy will literally save hundreds and hundreds of lives during epidemics that are taking people's life needlessly. Why? Because people perish for the lack of knowledge, and certainly because of the lack of understanding of what to do. So people need to know, and we can be the ambassadors. Anybody, regardless of your worldview or your faith, anybody can be an ambassador for health and help other people that are in need. Because we're all going to be exposed, right? We're all going to be exposed at some point. And so if we are healthy enough to get through that and mobilize a healthy immune response, then we can go in and help other people. Because who else is going to help them? Right? Who else is going to help them? Only people who understand these principles. Okay, so now, the other part of this, which is a little bit more laborious, if you will, it takes more effort, is to do fomentations. You need somebody doing it to you. Dr. Charles Thomas, a physical therapist, years ago, he's passed away now. He was old when I was a student, okay, over 35 years ago. But I went to his clinic in Banning, California, and learned some of the principles. Actually, he did hydrotherapy on me. I loved it. You know, I went with one of my friends who's a family physician now, and he did hydrotherapy on both of us. And he basically taught many, many people how to do hydrotherapy. I was looking to find his videos online. I can't find them. I used to have all his videos. I don't know. Maybe there's some box in our garage somewhere. But essentially, you do this. You take a towel, kind of a thick towel, a Turkish towel. We have actually the thick wool towels. They're that thick that are about a foot wide and about 2 feet long, and you wet them, and then you wring them out. You don't want the towel or the Turkish towel to be dripping. You want it to be moist through and through. If it's not moist, you could actually burn it in the microwave. So it has to be moist through and through. So then if you use a regular towel, you just got to make sure that you wring it out well, and then you put it in a plastic bag and microwave it for 3 to 5 minutes. Or you could initially do 2 minutes at a time until you know you have the right heat level for that microwave, because every microwave is different. And then and you actually do 2 towels initially at once. So then you put a towel down on the floor, okay, or the bed, if you will, and then you when you get the heated towels and unroll them, you then fold another towel around it, a dry towel around it. So you have a dry towel beneath you, then you have another towel around that, and then you put another towel down on top of that before you lay down on it, because the heat is so penetrating you'll burn your skin if you don't do that. So that's the back. So you're getting heat from the back. You lay down on it. You have the person lay down. And then you do another towel on the chest, dry towel. And then you wrap the other wet towel and another dry towel, put that on the dry towel that's on your chest, and you just leave it there for about 5 minutes. Okay? Yes? Oh, yeah, thank you. And then you get a cold cloth, a wet, cold cloth with ice water on your forehead. That combination of fomentation pads that are hot will warm up your core temperature very quickly. And you're creating a fever is what you're doing. Well, that's what you want to do. And you're mobilizing the immune system dramatically at that time. And then after 5 minutes, during that 5 minutes, you got 2 other towels going in the microwave. So it's very busy work for the person administering the hydrotherapy. And then keep the forehead towel nice and cool. And then at the end, you have some ice water washcloth, and you rub down the chest, okay, and you rub down the back with ice water. Okay, and then you switch the old towels with new towels and do the same thing over again 3 times. You do that 3 times. It takes about 20 minutes to get through a series of hydrotherapy, and that's work for the administrator. That's work. But I tell you, and so here's the bottom line. The Dr. Charles Thomas used to say, as soon as you're done, that person is done. They're just laying there. They're not doing anything. They're not even standing in a shower, right? They're just laying down there, just enjoying this. They're actually starting to feel better. They're feeling the body's healing. And of course, the person administering it, ideally, pray with the person at the beginning and at the end, right? Prayer is healing. Prayer is healing. There's a medical professor at Yale University. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was Duke University, who's actually documented with good research studies that prayer changes things in healing. I've actually listened to him talk. Brilliant, brilliant professor of medicine. He actually teaches class on how to do studies using prayer. Okay, so at any rate, you do all the holistic protocol, and then that person doesn't just get up and go back to work. See, that's what makes things fail, is when you just do it, then you get back to whatever you were doing before. The trick is, do you immediately go to bed, or if you're at a clinic, you then get bundled up in a dry sheet. So you have to be dry, and you get bundled up and you sleep for at least 20 minutes, or you rest for at least 20 minutes. Why? Because that's the powerful period of healing where you get what is called spontaneous blastogenesis, where the B cells of the lymphatic system dramatically produce more antibodies. And of course, that's what you want. You want to have a high antibody count to tie up those viruses and immobilize them so they can't infect your cells. Right? So this is powerful. There was a study about 2.5 weeks ago on the German gentleman who contracted COVID-19 from a Chinese coworker who was reportedly, in the medical journal article, asymptomatic at the time. Later, they discovered that she did have symptoms, but she didn't let on to anybody that she did. In other words, she wasn't that sick, but she was a little bit sick, which is what most people are going to do with this problem. That's why it's going to spread, right? And so he initially got sick, okay, and then was contacted by the epidemiologists that had discovered that the Chinese lady, the business colleague, had gotten sick, and so they told their outfit in Germany, hey, this patient, this individual was positive for the coronavirus, and so they then found out several other people had gotten sick as well. Well, he got sick for 2 days, and then got better. So he just thought he had a little bit of a touch of the flu. He went back to work. Okay, and then he infected other people because he really wasn't well. The reoccurrence rate is high. Well, here's the reason I'm telling you. Normally in a respiratory illness, the viral titer, that is the level of the virus in the body, will drop precipitously along with symptoms. In other words, once you become asymptomatic, once you're recovered clinically, the viral count has dropped almost to negligible levels. That doesn't happen apparently with this virus. The virus stayed high even after he recovered. That's why you can basically infect people for days and maybe a week or more after you've fully recovered. That's why this is such a deadly epidemic, because it's totally different than past epidemics. And so be aware of viral shedding at all phases, right? So when people sweat, they're going to shed viruses. They checked his blood for viruses. It was 10 to the, I think, 8th power of virus per milliliter. That's a lot of virus. Okay, and so again, that's why it's such a problem, and we have to have the healthiest immune system possible, or we're going to have problems. Okay, so this is the time to act. All right, so that's an extended answer to your question, which really may be the most important part of the whole talk, right there. Okay, yes, back in the...
For somebody who's diabetic and exercises, what's the normal routine? Like, say if they did it in the morning, or was it more important doing the exercise after meal?
Oh, all right, thanks you for
Or
asking
3
this. So is exercise more important in the morning or after meals? Yes and yes. Okay, so when I referred to exercising lightly after meals, I'm not talking about the daily exercise session. I'm talking about adding that to the daily exercise session as a non-get sweaty form of exercise. I'm just talking about moving the body. In fact, we should really say that the body should be moving for at least 2 to 3 minutes every hour. We should never sit, ideally more than half an hour, or at least not more than an hour without getting at least 2 to 3 minutes of walking or some type of moderate physical exercise. Because even if you exercise intensively for 45 to 60 minutes a day and you're super fit and you're sitting most of the day, that right there is depressing your immune system and creating inflammation. So we want to optimize. In my book, Memory Makeover, I actually have a huge section on this where I talk about the activity quotient, like a batting average. Okay, you want to have a exercise activity average where you're at least standing. By the way, standing is a form of activity. So I'm getting a lot of physical activity right now by just standing and maybe moving around a little bit, okay, which counts towards the activity level for the day. Sitting doesn't count. So the more you can be standing, the more you can be active throughout the day. Here's what I say in my book. We should be at minimum standing or walking or moving for at least 2 hours every morning, 2 hours every afternoon, and 2 hours every evening. How many people do that? Right? You count it up. Very few of us do that, but so we got to think about, just use our, so at work, we can use a Veridesk, right? Where instead of sitting, we're standing several times during the day, and that right there, you can get most of your activity just by standing. You can do other little things where you can stand and pump your legs like this. Or even if you're sitting, you can have a little bicycle ergometer near the couch or under your desk. There's a lot of things we can do to be active. So we need to be active. We need to be active after meals in particular, because once blood sugars go up, they've done their damage. And what goes up must come down. It's going to do more damage. And what goes up causes insulin to go up, which causes even more damage. So that's why exercise after meals is so critical. And then, yes, keep doing the aerobic or the fitness-related, sweaty type muscle toning exercises that are so important for health as well.
So back onto the exercising after eating. So eat dinner, stand up and watch a movie. Is that good?
You're getting there. You're getting there, but not quite.
And then walking
so,
to the...
yeah. No, I
walking
mean,
to-
yeah, compared to laying down and watching a movie, that's much better.
So-
no question.
Getting up and going to the fridge every hour is good too?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now you're getting into trouble. So, the key is try to get that intermittent fast or that extended fast for at least 12 hours every evening. Eat early, and then don't eat anything. The most important fast is the fast between meals. The fast between breakfast and lunch, the fast between lunch and dinner, and then the fast until breakfast again. So roughly, our goal, and there's more details to this that we could discuss someday, but the goal is to do 4 to 5 hours, no snack between meals. If you do it right, nobody needs to snack between meals. Unless you have like an insulinoma tumor in your pancreas that is producing 10 times more insulin than you need, and then you got to eat something or else your blood sugar crashes. I've had patients like that. But the rest of us don't have a good excuse. We just got to learn to eat the right balance of food that stabilizes us for 4 to 5 hours. And then nothing to eat after an early evening meal, if that, until breakfast.
At home, we have some N95 masks, thanks to our friend Lisa.
Good for you.
I'm just wondering, if we're in the exposure stage, when should we start wearing those, if at all?
You know, I was going to give a free book to somebody who came to church with a mask on, but I guess it's not going to happen. Actually, I didn't even bring the book because I didn't think it'd happen. You know, there's a lot of mixed messages about masks right now. You've heard people say they're not that helpful, but then they say wear it anyways. Okay? And here's the reality. They are helpful. Because, see, the main thing about COVID-19, or the actually SARS coronavirus 2, is that it is not only in droplets, right? So if I sneezed right now or coughed vigorously right now, because I'm a little higher up, the larger droplets might actually get you in the first 2 rows. Usually we say 3 to 6 feet, but I talk loud and I cough loud, right? So that stuff just comes projecting out and it just goes, like a home run. Okay, so any mask will obstruct the projectile large droplets, even a surgical. Surgical masks are the worst type of masks. They're not that good, actually. Surgical mask just prevents you from coughing on somebody else. It doesn't do much at all to keep you from airborne viruses yourself. Okay, but that's why N95 is a much better next step. Even better than that is N99. But N95 is kind of the standard. Okay, just make sure it's got a little clip on it, a little aluminum strip on it, so that you can pinch the nose, so that it contours your face. There's no gaps. That surgical mask, you see that all the time. Somebody wearing a surgical mask, there's a big gap right here, where the normal airflow can just you breathe in, and if you had particulate matter in the air, which of course the viruses are they just go right in through here and right into your lungs. So the whole point of a mask is to prevent virus from getting sucked into your lungs. The virus is aerosolized, we believe, until proven otherwise, like the flu. Okay? And so it just hangs, the little droplets that don't drop right away, they just kind of hang in the air for a while. So if you're breathing through your nose or through your mouth without a mask, you are sucking in virus into your lungs. So that's why you want to wear a mask. Okay, so it's a perfect strategy, but by itself may not be enough, right? So if you're wearing a mask, but you just had 3 beers the night before, we know from the AIDS research that if you have like a couple beers the night before, the next day you're much more susceptible to catch HIV if you have unprotected sex. So these are the type of things we need to know about. Okay, and this is that's why I'm taking the time to talk about it, because I'm not hearing very many people give us practical solutions. In other words, if there was ever a time to stop drinking beer and alcohol, it's right now. Why? Because it depresses your immune system. Yeah, it might make you feel a little bit better at the time, but it's going to depress your immune system. So don't do it. Okay? The same thing with unhealthy food. It depresses your immune system. So in terms of, so masks are good, and that's probably the most important protective strategy. The other thing about masks, my wife tells me, how many times you touch your face during your talk this morning or last night? I don't think of it, but I'm sure I've touched my face all the time. I'm thinking this, thinking that. So that's one reason that I don't want to touch anybody else, because that means you're going to be all over my face, right? So the nice thing about a mask, besides the obvious, well, it's not so obvious. That's why I mentioned it. It's not obvious to people that they're breathing in virus, right? They just think that they're preventing a sneeze or a cough getting on them. And yes, that's important, but it's more likely that you're breathing in virus. So that's the value of a mask. The other value is that if you have a mask over your nose and face, you can't touch your nose and your face directly. And it reminds you not to do it, right? I probably wouldn't be doing it. If I have this physical mask on my face, I'm not going to be touching my mask all the time because it feels weird, right? It reminds you. So that's another strategy to consider. The other thing that I would do, and I touched on this last night. I just touched my face again. I mentioned it last night briefly. Use iodine. Okay, the low, really any type of iodine, you can spray it. Get a pharmaceutical grade sprayer, spray it right on the outside of the mask. Not totally saturating it potentially, but just enough so there's iodine on your mask. So when you breathe in air through the mask, the virus, the coronavirus, is, I understand, 1/3 the size of the smaller spores in the N95 mask. What's that tell you? Okay, it's like throwing gravel through a chain link fence. Most of the gravel gets through, right? So if you're breathing stuff through, you're not gonna get as many viruses. You're not gonna get the droplets, but you still could get viruses, right? Okay, so if you spray that with iodine, it'll zap any virus. Iodine is the most powerful antiviral substance, and it's cheap. Okay? Now, I need to put this on my website because I always get people asking me, well, what kind? And there's a whole bunch of questions. Bottom line, get the diluted iodine like I showed last night, which is 150 micrograms per drop. That's very dilute, but still potently antiviral. Yeah, so it actually comes in a dropper, but you can buy a snoot cap, a little bottle that has a snoot cap, a spritzer. It's pharmaceutical grade. You can snort it up your sinuses, really good for sinuses. And of course, that's where the virus likes to be as well. There appears to be more viruses in the sinuses than in the throat, according to recent studies on throat swabs and sinus swabs. Which didn't make sense to me because the virus likes the lungs more than the sinuses. So I don't know why that's true. Maybe it's the collection method is the problem. But so you can inhale the iodine directly into your lungs, but it has to be the dilute one. You know, if it's the stronger one, then you got to use a nebulizer and you got to know what you're doing. 150 micrograms per drop. The one I like, well, any of them that are, it's called potassium iodide. It's the potassium salt of iodine, which is more soluble in water. That's why they do it that way. And it's the brand I like is from Biotics Research, which you can get from any clinic that does natural methods, any chiropractor's office. A lot of them use that. I've been using it for 20, 30 years. It's really good. If by the way, if you can't find it, here. This is my personal one. Don't take it. Okay? So here's the trick. See that? Now I just created a iodine mist, a dilute iodine mist. Keep my eyes open, and the iodine goes, a little bit of that goes right into your eyes, which brings us to the second obstruction strategy beside a mask, is wearing some type of goggles or wraparound glasses. The reality is, this is less of a likely entrance because your eyes aren't breathing air in. So you're less likely to get viruses going into your eye, but it's still possible. And so if it's what a lot of people are doing, well, I even shouldn't say that. What some people are doing who are careful are wearing like the firefighter masks that don't breathe because of smoke. They're non-breathable masks, and you just wear them. Okay, so you can get them on Amazon. I have enough for our family. Okay, you can, if you can't find those, go to Walmart and buy swimming goggles. Those are really sleek looking. Okay, but they completely prevent virus from coming into the eyes. You just look like you're going swimming later, right? And then wear a good mask. So I think the most careful of us would start using the mask fairly soon. But you know how we are. I'd actually feel embarrassed if I was wearing a mask right now. But actually a week ago, I was getting a tire changed on my Jeep because I had a big old nail in it. And saw my first, I went into the waiting room for the Jeep, and or the tire place rather, and there was a Chinese man in the waiting room wearing a mask. So I said, "Good for you," okay. And we both kept our distance. Okay, yes. Well, okay, so you can't technically buy this unless you get it through a clinic, but it's over the counter. Okay, in other words, they don't sell just to anybody, but you can go to my website and find it there. Or I just tell, get it wherever you can, but if you can't find it anywhere else, you can go to dryoungberg.com. Yeah. I have a store for my patients so they can access things I recommend, which I never wanted to do before because I didn't want to have the reputation of selling stuff. And then I had many patients tell me, he says, "You know what? Okay, you're more worried about your reputation than you are about our health." And I realized, you're right. You're right, I am. And basically, our goal is to sell the highest quality products less than retail, so you know you're not getting scammed. Now be careful when you order iodine online. I ordered some stronger, like Lugol's iodine online, and I noticed a trick that's a scam. Even on Amazon, they're selling it for the normal price, but they're charging $100 for shipping. So never buy something without checking shipping. Okay, so if you get stuff on Amazon, you should order Prime, and you should have free shipping, or don't buy it. If you don't get free shipping, don't buy it, because it's more likely a scam. Okay, so the Biotics, this is called liquid iodine forte, 150 micrograms per drop. You can basically spray it up into your nostrils like this, breathe it in. Okay, it might make you sneeze a couple times because it's just mildly irritating. but that iodine will coat the inner sinus and nostrils and powerfully antiviral, okay? You can breathe it in like an inhaler and get iodine into your lower lungs, and that's where the virus likes to do its damage, so kill it. So these are just simple remedies that have been documented for decades to be effective. I did a lot of research on this because I didn't want to recommend something that ended up to be bogus, right? And so there's so much, there's actually research showing that iodine in dilute levels kills the coronavirus SARS, the original SARS 2002. It kills the MERS coronavirus better than anything else. So we don't have research on how well it kills COVID or SARS coronavirus 2 that causes COVID-19. But I don't think we need that to start acting, do we? We're not going to have research on that till many people are infected. So let's start taking advantage of natural remedies. Yes?
I have is my understanding well that you can produce high amounts of insulin without having high sugar levels?
Absolutely.
It's interesting, and I wanted to mention...
So the comment is that you can produce lots of insulin even though you don't have high blood sugar levels. I had a 21-year-old cheerleader who was a senior in high school. Her mom brought her in. We did a 4-hour glucose tolerance test on her. Her blood sugars were perfect the entire 4 hours, not even a hint of even a tendency towards early prediabetes, but her insulin levels were running like 100, super high, about 5 times higher than they should have been. And that means that there's some inflammatory process, there's some toxic process, there's some autoimmune process that is driving insulin resistance, and we got to figure out what it is.
Because it was interesting. My mother came to visit us for 6 months. She's 81. She's diabetic, had high blood pressure, and GERD, and multiple things for digestive issues.
Yes.
So Dr. Lowe knows the story because I asked him for some support, and we did some blood tests on her. And I told her, just eat what I eat, and let's go on walks after you eat, and that's it. So all my family was telling me, oh, you're going to kill my mom because you're crazy with your diet and you only eat plants. And it was, I was a little nervous because if something happened to my mom, it's going to be my fault.
Yeah.
But anyway, she came for 6 months, dropped 10 pounds, and she needed to eat every 2 hours because her blood sugar will drop in 60s. So every 2 hours, she needed to eat something. So she started eating different in the morning, and we would go on walks. So when she left, she dropped 10 pounds, no blood pressure medication. We had to take it off after 3 months because it was dropping too low. And also,
So she was taking insulin?
No.
Was she on medicines for diabetes?
The sugar level was okay. Fasting was 85.
No, but was she on medicines for diabetes? No. Okay.
No, just diet. Mm-hmm. But I noticed she was shaking she needed to eat every 2 hours. But we start eating different. She started eating what we eat at home, and we will go on walks and more water and everything. So when she left, she dropped 10 pounds. We had to take the blood pressure medication, and the GERD medication, she didn't need it, and she took it for 5 years, and she didn't need it anymore. Now she's back in Costa Rica. All my family is all happy. I'm thankful. Nothing happened to her, and she didn't even get a cold or nothing.
That's great.
Nothing. But we did notice that the AC1C, it was 5 point, in the test that she got from Costa Rica, it was 5.5, and then with the last one we did, it was 6 point something. So I was a little confused. I didn't know what could have triggered it. And
you said that the A1C went up?
Yeah,
okay,
a little bit.
So how long after moving back to Costa Rica?
No. It was when she was here. Before she left, we did the AC1C.
Well, I would repeat the hemoglobin A1C. That doesn't make sense. So if she's actually doing better, the hemoglobin A1C would have probably improved further below 5.5. So the hemoglobin A1C is actually not that accurate. It's that blood sugars are more accurate than the hemoglobin A1C. So a glucose tolerance test is like 3 to 4 times more accurate for diagnosing diabetes or prediabetes. Okay. Good. Yes.
How effective is silver?
I didn't get how effective is
Silver.
silver, like colloidal silver?
Yes.
Okay, so that's actually, I have it in a bottle right next to this one at work, in my car, and at home. So I use a product, it's called ACS 200. It's and it doesn't say what the particulate, how nanoparticulate it is. The research shows the smaller the particle of colloidal silver, the more antiviral it is. There's better research on iodine than colloidal silver, even though some researchers would argue the other way around. I just haven't seen it. Colloidal silver has been reported to me by scientists to actually be very effective in killing HIV. So, you know, that's pretty impressive. So you can combine those. You can, sometimes people will combine it in the same bottle. But I like to put a snoot cap on that one too, and I'll just do a little bit of both. By the way, here's another great disinfectant, much better than a hand sanitizer. Actually, this is the best hand sanitizer. So you spray this. That's why I have it at work, in my car, everywhere that I just do a little spraying on my hand, and I've just sanitized my hands, and anything I touch, I'm killing virus everywhere I go. Yes.
Can you talk about toxicity on colloidal silver and on iodine? Because we've seen in our practice actually patient overdose with colloidal, and they actually had spotty face and came off to laser it off.
Let's
But
say
anyway,
that they had what?
spotty from colloidal silver, basically
So
overdosing.
kind of blue man's disease?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
overdose and or toxicity.
in theory, colloidal silver, especially the home-developed forms of colloidal silver, you can get little machines that make colloidal silver, which I discourage. I don't pretend to be an expert in it, but you want to make sure you're getting a clinical-grade colloidal silver if you use it, and so you know it has its pros and cons. I've had patients who literally would drink a bottle of it every day. Wow. And I'm going like, what are you doing? And they're going, that's the only way I can feel good. It's kind of hard to argue with that, but I'm saying, well, there's going to be a downside somewhere here. And there's actually reports of people permanently tattooing their skin in a blue-gray hue because the silver stays in your skin. It literally tattoos your skin. But it is antimicrobial, antiviral. You know, so, you know, what would you rather have? Kind of a blue man tattoo or be dead? You know, so but that's why I don't emphasize colloidal silver per se. There's more potential questions about it. But with iodine, other than the fact that 1 in 1,000, maybe as high as 1 in 100, others say 1 in 1,000,000 are allergic to iodine, even nutritional iodine, there's really little downside. You gotta be careful about the detox reactions. You know, when you start taking iodine, you're getting rid of fluoride and bromide, which is part of the same halide family, and you're dumping that into the system, and that can make you feel sick. Why? Because you're getting rid of toxins. Right, so you don't want to feel sick. You don't want to go through a Herxheimer reaction. You want to do it slow enough to gradually dissipate toxins out of your body. And if you're killing fungi or bacteria or parasites in your body with iodine, especially at higher levels, then you got to be careful with that because that's releasing toxins from the die-off reactions, and that's bad for you too. But you got to find the right balance. Okay, so the theory behind Dr. David Derry, MD, PhD, who's written a book on iodine, he wrote a paper and published it in a thyroid medical journal in 2009. You can look it up on the internet. Basically, reviewing the benefits of iodine is an antiviral for respiratory infections. And what he said, he wrote it in response to the SARS epidemic. He basically said he recommends 12.5 milligrams. Okay, that's 12,500 micrograms of iodine a day to build up in your body so that you're actually, your body fluids and your mucosal fluids are high enough in iodine so they'll kill viruses on contact in your lungs, in your throat, in your sinuses, anywhere you have contact. So I'm sure that there's criticisms of that consideration, but you gotta weigh the pros and cons. And so that's why I actually put that as just recently as a recommendation on my short list for patients to consider doing that in addition to doing this like 3 times a day, 3 or 4 times a day. This is so easy to do. It's easy to use.
So Wes, so he wrote it in a thyroid, some kind of journal or something like that. So there's no impact on the thyroid gland from using.
All right. So that is one. Clinically, the average physician would go like, whoa, time out here. You could be shutting down your thyroid gland. So that's the theory. Now, years ago, before we had medicines for Graves' disease or hyperthyroidism, how was it treated medically? By taking up to 150 milligrams of iodine daily, even multiple times a day, to basically shut down Graves' disease, the excess production of the thyroid hormone. So because of that therapeutic usage years ago, by the way, it's still potentially a good therapy now, it just has to be monitored. But because of that, the average clinician says, well, if you give that to patients with regular thyroid or hypothyroid, you could make them worse. That does not appear to be true, okay, clinically. So, anything you do clinically, you need to monitor. You need to check 6 weeks later, check thyroid levels, check free T3, free T4. I check reverse T3, thyroid antibodies, and so forth to make sure that we're making adjustments to the individual response, which may be different than statistical responses out there in the studies. So, again, we need to weigh the theoretical pros and cons and ask the question, how do we prepare for something that has the potential to kill over 100 million people? Right? I mean, sometimes it's easy to weigh those pros and cons. Yeah, make sure you go to the mics over here.
Okay. I have a question. On the...
Just speak right into the mic. You're on.
Okay. On the iodine, if you take it internally, like through your water,
yes,
is it okay to do that and the spray, or is it too much?
Yeah. So liquid iodine. I mean, if you snort it up your nose, if you spray it into your lungs, that's the same thing as drinking it. It's in your body. It's just a quicker introduction into your body, right? It's going right into your bloodstream. Whereas if you drink it, it's going to be absorbed, through the tissues, because iodine absorbs very easily, no matter where. So when I spray it on my hands, it's actually absorbing into my body, just because it's on my hands. By the way, anything you touch absorbs into your body. That's why I had patients who in Guam who actually bought lead pipes and sold them by the cargo load to China. And I checked his lead levels; they were through the roof. He goes like, "What?" I said, "Do you handle lead pipes with your bare hands?" He says, "Yeah, everybody does." Wow. I go, "Well, you do it enough that you're actually toxic with lead." Same thing with aluminum. That's why we discourage the use of cooking in aluminum foil.
Yeah,
why? Because anything you cook in that aluminum foil is going to absorb aluminum, and then you eat that food, you're going to absorb aluminum. And just in the last year, we've had definitive research out of Europe that says aluminum does promote dementia. It may not be the most important driver, but it is a driver. So we want to minimize our exposure to things that we touch that are bad for us. like people who go to the shooting ranges and load their own ammo. Okay, you can actually see the lead on their fingers. They got to wash that off and use some type of chelating agent to get rid of that lead. Okay, so
I have a question on the iodine. When I went in for a DVD test, they told me I had a reaction with hives because of the radiographic contrast agent from iodine. I'm wondering if I snort that iodine, it's going to do the same thing to me.
okay, so you have a reaction to high amounts of iodine, medical stuff. The question remains whether you would have a reaction to nutritional iodine. Do you have a similar reaction to regular table salt?
No, I don't. The other thing is I've been
No,
using.
no, answer the question. Do you ever
No, I
have
don't.
table salt?
No.
Okay, never. Wow, you're the only one in the room that never has table salt. Okay.
No, I mean I don't
so-
have any reaction to table salt.
All right, so that's my point. My point
That I
is
know
that
of.
there's iodine in table salt, and so there's, in other words, there's a continuum. That's what I'm trying to get at. There's a continuum at where somebody who's sensitive starts noticing sensitivity, and so what I would do if I was you, I would just do a little spray on your hand, and see what happens.
I've been using this povidone iodine because I've had some wounds on my feet, and that doesn't seem to
Which
be
one? The povidone?
Povidone
Okay,
iodine.
that one is powerfully antiviral.
Right.
That one will kill any virus.
Right, and you
Okay,
mentioned.
so if you're using that, you're absolutely not sensitive
Okay.
because that's super strong iodine.
Right.
Okay, I mean, there's all kinds of medical studies showing how powerfully antiviral that is.
And last night when you
By the
mentioned.
way, it'll cure any bacterial, so use it. I'm glad you're using it. That's a great thing.
You said last night you used it as a hand wash, but it's red. I mean, you use that with your hands.
This
your
is not red.
No, but the povidone iodine
Yeah, the
stuff.
povidone. No, you don't want to.
Don't use that
I'm
as a
not
hand.
talking about using betadine. Now, the Lugol's is slightly red as well. That's the iodine is a little bit of a. It can, if you use a lot of it and you put it on your skin, it turns your skin kind of a yellowish look, right? So that can mess your clothes up. The regular nutritional iodine, potassium iodide, is clear. You can spray it on your suit and it won't do anything.
May I ask about a vitamin D also?
Vitamin D?
Yeah, you said the sunlight. When you go into the sunlight, you're talking about getting exposure, but obviously that must be limited by what kind of clothes you're wearing, or if you're long sleeves or
Right.
short. What's the strategy for getting enough sun but not too much sun?
Okay, the most important thing about sunlight is the sun above 45 degrees in the sky. It's called the sun shadow standard. It's just something I made up to make it easier to explain. So if your shadow is longer than you are tall, you're not making any adequate vitamin D at all. Okay, so that's why you have to be out in the middle of the day, check your shadow, and it's got to be shorter than you are tall, or else you're not making any vitamin D. The next consideration, as you suggested, is having enough skin showing that you're actually generating vitamin D. Sun can't generate vitamin D through clothes. It can only do it on bare skin. And so in theory, arms and face can generate a significant amount of vitamin D in 15 to 20 minutes. But that's the theory. In clinical practice, that isn't true. How do I know that? Because I've been in clinical practice for 30 years. In the last 20 years, I've checked everybody's vitamin D. And unless you're in the sun a lot more than that, you're not going to generate enough vitamin D. That's why I tell everybody, supplement according to your blood levels.
And that comes to my next question. I have a bottle of vitamin D, which is 5,000 units, and that seems to even be pretty high. But yesterday you were talking about 50,000 units. So you take 10
So
tablets?
now you feel more conservative, don't you?
Well, my point is,
that was my
where do
point.
you buy the stuff that you're talking about? It's so concentrated.
You just buy the liquid, and that has 2,000 units per drop, and then you take as many drops as you need to get that 50,000. But the average person needs at least 5,000 units daily, especially somebody bigger, Okay, remember, the more fat we carry, the more vitamin D gets stored into fat, which means it's useless. So we need, that's why I always say go with your blood levels, because it's not a question of how much you're taking, it's a question of how much stays in your blood. Okay? And so that's why you got to get tested. And, you know, insurance typically doesn't cover for vitamin D anymore because it's considered to be unnecessary. I disagree totally, but I'm not running the insurance company. Okay? And so when I test myself for vitamin D, I pay for it out of my own pocket because it's worth it. And so don't wait for insurance to pay for stuff. Pay for it yourself because it's the right thing to do.
I noticed the therapeutic ranges of vitamin D from places like Kaiser are way lower than what you recommend. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true. It is. Okay, I'm just telling you my experience. But the blood levels, the normal ranges are 30 to 100. That's the normal documented ranges. All I'm saying is take enough to get into the upper third of the normal range. And that's what you need. So just go by blood levels, and if you can do that with 2,000 a day, lucky you. Probably not. You probably need 5,000. You probably would need 10,000, especially if you have problems with sores or unhealed ulcers. You're going to need a lot more vitamin D. Why? Because your body's using the vitamin D to mobilize the immune system. Okay.
Can you repeat your website, please?
It's just Google Wes Youngberg, Dr. Youngberg, or dryoungberg.com is the website.
Dr. Youngberg.
Yeah.
Youngberg.
I if you're willing to wait. Okay, so I mean, I take anybody, but you just have to wait your turn. Yeah, I tend to fill up about 2 months in advance. So I'm not trying to get new patients, but I don't turn people away either.
When you say vitamin D, you're referring to vitamin D3, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so vitamin D2 is ergocalciferol. It's the plant-based vitamin D. But the only way you can get plant-based vitamin D is by eating shiitake mushrooms or maybe a few other things. If you eat a whole shiitake steak, mushroom steak, you're getting around 1,500 units of vitamin D, which is pretty good, okay? But even that's not adequate. Okay, so you don't want to rely on that, and you don't even want to take vitamin D2 as a supplement because your body has to convert that to vitamin D3. So you may as well just take vitamin D3, preferably in a vegan form. In other words, they've taken ergocalciferol, vitamin D2, and they've synthetically converted it into a bioidentical D3. So now you don't have an animal origin with any risk of possible contamination. Okay, so that's what I recommend. Yeah, see, so many forms of vitamin D are now coming with vitamin K. Personally, I use vitamin K in addition in a separate form. But yes, you want vitamin K as well.
I forgot to ask how much vitamin C daily, just on the regular.
Okay.
C.
We're going through the alphabet here. Okay, so, well, you know, so I mentioned, I skipped over a lot of this last night because we were already over time. But here's the bottom line. The average animal that generates their own vitamin D makes around 3,000 milligrams a day, just in a healthy state. So, an animal that's our size. Okay, so you could argue that it's reasonable to, if you're eating a really healthy plant-based diet, like what Dr. Furman promotes in his promotions, you're going to be getting about 1,000, 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C naturally in the whole plant-based food. And then you could argue you'd want at least another 1,500 milligrams on top of that. Okay? Now, if you have any health issues, whether it be cholesterol, heart disease, diabetes, whatever, or you're prone to getting sick, then I would just ratchet that up. And so you could you don't want to use any more vitamin C than your digestive system allows. If you start having gassiness or loose stools, that is your body telling you, back off of that, or more gradually increase it. So you can, if you do it slow enough, your body gets used to it. But for my patients who need more than the average person, I'm suggesting vitamin C is cheap. Do close to 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day, but you got to start slow and gradually work up. These are the simple remedies that go above and beyond the aggressive natural remedies. A lot of, some people say people who take supplements are just doing that as an excuse not to be healthy. And I hope that's not true for any of us, okay? But that's a lousy argument against supplementing on top of a healthy lifestyle. It's just a very bad argument. We're just trying to do whatever is best for us to optimize. And again, treat based on your condition. And then if an animal who is sick with a virus are generating, an animal our size that's sick with a virus would generate close to 20,000 milligrams a day from glucose. We can't do that, so what does that tell you? And the bottom line is, take as much as is reasonable for you without bowel problems, and if you're sick, you need more. You're not going to, if I'm not feeling well, I can take 15, 20 grams a day, but if I'm feeling well, that I'll end up in the toilet for a couple hours doing that. So adjust according to your body's need. And that to me, I mean, it's a simple remedy, but a potentially very useful remedy as well. Okay, that's a good time to end. Well, thank you, everybody. Well, we made that a 2-hour session, another marathon. Okay, it's been a pleasure talking. You're a very intelligent audience. You had very, very good questions, and so remember, take the time to sleep well, plan ahead, figure out whatever you need to do to sleep well, and make sure that you don't deny yourself the natural remedies first and foremost, and then you can bring in aspects of the simple remedies to augment the strategies that are most important. Okay? God bless you.